Instead of on Zillow, it's bedrooms and bathrooms and geography and Zestimate and all that. On Ivy, the things that matter to emergency physicians are whether it's a trauma center, whether they're residents, whether it's critical access, how many patients do they see per year, what do other emergency physicians think about that department and that practice, and then take it to the next step, which is on Zillow, you can, it helps you in various ways to actually, see the property and potentially even put a bid in for that property. Same thing with Ivy Clinicians. We have the contact information of all of the in-house recruiters, so that the direct, not having a third party involved, a direct connection between you.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Leon Adelman, an emergency physician, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Ivy Clinicians, a platform bringing transparency to physician job searches. We dive into the business of medicine, how doctors can stop leaving money on the table, and why job freedom is just as important as financial freedom. Here we go. It's here, drum roll time. Leon, welcome to the show, man. How are you feeling today?
Doing great, Brett. It's an honor to be on the podcast with you.
Oh, it's so cool. I've got really a lot of things that we could talk about that are completely off topic, but we want to stick to topic here a little bit. Let's jump right into it, Leon. Tell us a little bit about your medical journey.
Yeah, so I'm an emergency physician and entrepreneur. My intended medical journey was in emergency department, emergency medicine practice, and hospital leadership. And so I worked my way up the chain, assistant medical director, and then through some kind of medical economics learning lessons that we can talk about later, I ended up jumping into entrepreneurship, started a marketplace software company to help emergency physicians find jobs. And now I'm kind of a little bit of everything. So I still practice clinically, run the software company, and still involved with some of the administrative side of emergency medicine.
And this economical learning lesson that you just mentioned, and now you've got this new platform, the software company you talk about is called Ivy Clinicians. And interesting enough, I'm putting these two things together and almost like it was developed out of need there in your, what sounds like maybe a change in jobs. Is that kind of how that came about?
Yeah. So the best entrepreneurial ideas are solving your own and your friends' problems. And so one of the kind of big picture problems that has come up in emergency medicine, but in a lot of specialties, is that the rapid change from medical practices, so physician-owned medical practices, where your goal is like find one partnership and hold on for dear life, right? Like things get better over time. You're a partner. The decisions get made partly by you and your peers. The finances accrue to you and your peers, and things get better over time. Well, that rapidly changed for emergency medicine, but also for most physicians, to an employed model. And in a world of employment, the way that you can protect yourself as an employee is by being willing to change jobs and being on the job market. Well, the job market in emergency medicine wasn't very transparent, and it was really hard to navigate, to the point where it was hard even to figure out which emergency medicine practice staffed which emergency department. So if you're a resident and you're moving, say you trained in Boston and you're moving to South Carolina, like just figuring out who your basket of potential employers are and what the differentiators are, much less like who to apply to, was really difficult. And so Ivy Clinicians was built or is built to solve that problem. So to bring transparency and real competition to the emergency medicine job market.
I love that. And it's the idea of an entrepreneur is built out of the necessity of what you need for yourself a lot of times, right? And that learning challenge or journey that you're on, you've created this is very, very interesting. I won't get too far into this, but I did see one of the productions that you have. It's got Zillow in there. And how does Zillow tie into this? Because that's our real estate world, right? So tell me a little bit about how Zillow ties into Ivy Clinicians.
Yeah, I love that question. So before Zillow, the way that you as a house buyer or a real estate, person on the real estate market would navigate that job market or navigate the real estate market is trusting a third-party professional. And why did you need to trust a third-party professional? It's because the information was hidden from you, right? So if somebody put a house on the market through their sell-side realtor, went on the MLS, well, normal people, like most physicians, couldn't get access to the MLS. You wouldn't really know what's on the market and what a fair value is and how to compare various buying options. And so you needed a realtor. And not only did you need a realtor, you need to pay them a lot of money because you need a good realtor who really could understand that job market. Well, Zillow came along and they were like, this is silly. Like this is all public information. If we can bring all of that information together, now we can empower the actual buyer to understand, hey, what's the fair market for this piece of real estate? What are my basket of potential units that I could, potentially bid for and purchase? So the real estate market became a lot more transparent, a lot more competitive, and a lot better for those of us who want to directly navigate that market. Well, same thing with the physician job market, right? So if you don't have the information, now you need to pay a bunch of middlemen, Jackson Physician Search or whatever the third party hiring entity is, and those entities, their job is basically to extract money between a transaction that's supposed to be between you, the physician, and the direct employer. So what Ivy Clinicians did was map all of the specialties. So connect every emergency department in the United States. There are about 6,000 emergency departments in the United States. Connect every single one of them with their emergency medicine employer, the employer of the physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners at that emergency department, and then connect that with lots of data. So instead of on Zillow, it's bedrooms and bathrooms and geography and Zestimate and all that. On Ivy, the things that matter to emergency physicians are whether it's a trauma center, whether they're residents, whether it's critical access, how many patients do they see per year, what do other emergency physicians think about that department and that practice, and then take it to the next step, which is on Zillow, you can, it helps you in various ways to actually, see the property and potentially even put a bid in for that property. Same thing with Ivy Clinicians. We have the contact information of all of the in-house recruiters, so that the direct, not having a third party involved, a direct connection between you and the in-house recruiter, so that you, the physician, can get a job with your preferred employer without anybody taking a cut in between.
That's awesome. So having that all put together, I mean, it completely makes sense. I love how it's that Zillow piece is a great analogy. And when you were talking there about having to have a realtor, I'm a licensed real estate agent in a couple of states. So don't get me wrong when I say this. It is crucial, especially when you're leveraging the experience. When we're talking about contract negotiation, when we're talking about due diligence, it's crucial to work with the right people. But the idea of handcuffing people from the data is it frustrates me so bad. And the idea of real estate agent versus realtor and the whole realtor. Oh my goodness, I could go into a whole nother show about this one, man. But you're right onto it about like people just need access to the data, right? When we create these walls in the real estate world, realtor, the realtor company. So there's realtor and then there's a real estate agent. There's two separate things. A lot of people don't know that there's two separate things there. But realtor is this company who has basically taken all of this data and say, hey, you've got to do this and this in order to see this data. And then somehow it's related to the licensing process in each state. It's mind blowing. And then finally we get to the data. So thank you so much for putting this stuff together. Similar with the job hunt. I'm sure, I'm not a physician, but I'm sure that is just as infuriating when you can't talk to somebody. You got to pay somebody else in order to talk to somebody. And it's mind blowing. So now I'll come down off my little box here about realtors and real estate agents and access to data, because with that data, there's power, right? We can leverage things. Just like when you used to go shop for a car, it was a lot easier to get run over if you didn't know what the comparable cars were selling for, if you didn't have access to that. Now the car dealerships have a tough time because that stuff's at your fingertips. Just like in Zillow, when we're in different markets with Zillow, we could, I can see from the Zestimate if the municipality data is not accurate or not up to date or doesn't refresh, that I have a better chance of getting a below market value property in those markets. So I'm sure that a lot of that aligns with the market for being a physician. Is that correct?
Yeah, no question. So the one of the analogies of getting a below market rate because of lack of information is the binary that now exists within emergency medicine, but this is true in most of medicine, where the private groups still kind of hold tight to how much their partners actually make, and the groups that have been bought out are posting their pay because physicians are just labor, right? Mm-hmm. And so labor to those employers, and usually there's like private equity or some other entity that owns that practice. So there are two layers of kind of information asymmetry that lead to problems within that ecosystem. One is that before Ivy Clinicians and before ways of transparently comparing salaries, because of the lack of salary transparency, you could have jobs that were 10 miles apart and physicians would be making $100 an hour different. Wow. even in a non-partnership, right? So doing exactly the same job. It's not like you have more ownership responsibility or something. It's just that one employer pays way more than the other, and people just don't know because there isn't transparency. Then there's the group versus labor model in medicine, where partly because the groups don't want to share, right? Like if you're a partner, like what's your incentive to like go online and say, we make X amount of dollars? There are a number of incentives to not share that, especially since you're constantly as a group negotiating with insurers and you're trying to get subsidies from hospitals, and hospitals can replace you with another group. Like you actually don't want to share that information at all because of these other entities trying to kind of take your stuff. And so what that has led to is non-owner physicians kind of getting rolled because they don't realize what the partners in medical practices are making, and they're not able to make nearly as much as they would if they were in a partnership, and they don't even realize it. And so there's a massive differentiation in pay in emergency medicine depending on your structure, and we kind of from the Ivy Clinicians perspective and my perspective as kind of a advocate for physicians, we want to bring transparency to that market so that all emergency physicians can get paid fairly.
Yeah. If you were to just roughly estimate that range that you're talking about, from an employee all the way up to a group, a member of a group, an annual expected income, what would you say that range falls in?
Yeah. So in emergency medicine, we tend to think of things hourly just because we're able to ramp up and down our number of hours, just the way kind of how the structure of working in the emergency department works. So on an hourly basis, what we've seen on our salary survey on Ivy Clinicians, we have 1,400 entries, so decent end there. For those paid W-2 as an employee, the average is about $215 per hour W-2. If you're paid 1099, so you don't have benefits, it's about $250. And the partners in medical practices generally are making between $300 and $350 K1. So it's a massive, and that's per hour, right? So we're talking $50 to $100 an hour difference, whether you're in a physician-owned group or whether you're being paid as labor.
Nice. And now we're talking about this Ivy Clinicians. I love how it's related to the real estate analogy. And the other piece of that is the entrepreneur path too. So I love the way that you've structured this from a software development aspect, because one, you've got the experience in this little thing. And what I talked a lot about is when we take a pivot in what we're doing, make sure that pivot is just like a 1-degree pivot. And that way you can compound all of your experience and time and effort that you've built up to this point and not just run off and leave it. But by having that medical background is crucial, but also in the job search is crucial too. So this little pivot, you've got that. Now you've partnered with the right people too. So you've partnered with, like on the software side, you've got a CTO, which is Chief Technology Officer. You've got a senior product designer, right? That UX, that UI, and for the people out there listening like me have no idea what that means, is basically the coder, right? The coder that comes in and puts the zeros and ones and turns them into a user interface, basically. And then a software engineer too on top of that. So you've got these people around you doing the right thing. I just want to congratulate you on that. How tough was that as an entrepreneur to get that idea into action?
So I think much like in real estate or investing, it's really important to know what you don't know, right? So I, as a physician, am really good at intubating and figuring out, what chest pain is dangerous and what chest pain is not dangerous. But that doesn't mean that I know how to code, right? And so in order to build a software company, it was very clear that not only did I have to bring on a co-founder who understands how to turn ideas about a business into actual design and development, but also give my partner kind of the tools and the flexibility to run with what he knows, right? So my partner, my co-founder is Matt Simpson. He is phenomenal, and one of the things one of the reasons we work so well together is that I don't question his code, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not pretending to know what he knows. He doesn't pretend to know that he doesn't pretend that he's a doctor. And so if you trust each other and build kind of together, then you can create something great. And we really are proud of what we've created through allowing our team to really run with the thing that they're really good at.
That's awesome. How did you, that first partnership with Matt, is that from a previous relationship, or did you go out seeking, to look, or did it come find you? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So Matt and I went to the same high school, except when I was at that high school, Matt was 2 years old. Right. So one of the pieces of wisdom that I got, so I had this like idea of like the marketplace, and then I started talking to folks who've created software companies and created, marketplace businesses. And one of the people that I talked to who had recently sold their business told me was, make sure that when you find a co-founder CTO, that you don't choose an old co-founder CTO. And I was like, well, first of all, what do you mean by old? He's like, I don't know, 40? And I'm like, at the time I was 42 years old, right? I'm like, old? I'm not, what are you talking about? He's like, okay. So here's the deal with software developers. If you're 40 years old and willing to start from something from like total scratch, like you're planning on doing, that is like a massive red flag for two reasons. One is that probably means that person failed at various other things before this, and so they're not, working with someone who's already created something and is kind of much bigger than you're just like random doctor dude with idea. The other potentiality is that this person is kind of desperate, right? So that they don't have other options. There isn't a good reason for a 40-year-old developer to be working with you. So find a 25-year-old and like work with them on the interpersonal stuff and on the business stuff, but let them run with the development. And so Matt was 26 when we started, and it's been like amazing. He is spectacular. So I now agree with the wisdom of, if you're going to start a software company and you are the market expert, go to a young kind of first or second attempt at creating a company software developer, because they're hungry, they're generally good, and they haven't already failed.
That makes perfect sense, 100%. And as a 40 plus person, I can see how that looks. That's funny though. It reminds me, I go to the gym. I love going to the gym, and oftentimes I'll get asked, for some reason, I have no idea. I get asked how old I am a lot. And when I tell everybody, like, oh, you don't look that at all. So I'm a happy 40 plus, whatever that means. But hey, in a hypothetical situation, Leon, if you were to help other people who kind of have a similar idea or would love to implement this journey, so you're reaching out to somebody where you know that you've got things and that they don't, but they have things that you don't, and the connection of those things is where the massive value lies. How do you approach that relationship from a business perspective, with the idea of, being a startup, not wanting to put any money into something necessarily without, because you got to get something before you do a capital raise. You got to get product and results. And so how does that work with trying to do everything? I've got it written on my board, without spending one penny. How do I go into this without spending one penny? Is it possible? And then that's what brings the equity piece into that relationship. So hypothetically speaking, you don't have to speak directly of your specific relationship, but what did you learn through this process when it comes to the startup without spending a penny, starting a new relationship, and the equity?
Yeah, so that's a really phenomenal question. One important thing as a physician entrepreneur is, because you likely have savings, it is tempting to
throw
be
money
willing, throw money at it. It's like, there's money in the bank, might as well, be out there, not in the bank. Well, that is an inherently risky proposition.
Similar,
right?
if you don't have the money too, if you know how to raise capital, it's similar to go raise capital and throw money at it too. And it's probably easier to throw money for some of those who raise capital because it's not their own.
Correct. So what's really important is to take a step back, and if you're starting a software company, put yourself in the shoes of a non-physician, non-professional who is starting a new software company, right? So when you look at really successful software companies, most of them were actually started by people in their like early to mid 20s who had an idea, right? And had a skill set that they then ran with and created massive value out of that. Well, how do they do that, right? They didn't do that because through like throwing their own money at it. They went through the kind of software funding process. So it's really important, much like real estate investing, there is kind of a playbook to doing it right. And there are a lot of ways to do it wrong. And it's really important to know the playbook. If you're going to deviate from the playbook, at least be a wise, like do that from a point of wisdom, not from a point of ignorance, right? And so kind of the playbook for early stage investing on the operator side, on the entrepreneur side is first, you need to have an idea and a team that is so good that you can convince investors to put their money in, right? So their job, the VCs and angel funds and your kind of friends and family set of investors, that's really the early test for your business idea, right? If you can't get VCs, angel funds, and your peers to put money in, you probably shouldn't be putting your own money in because they're telling you by saying no that, hey, you're not there yet. Mm-hmm. And so the playbook from there is if there is a team worthy of investment, if there is an idea worthy of investment, there's plenty of money out there, right? So VCs have plenty of money. Angel funds have plenty of money. Physician peer groups have plenty of money. And so, yes, it is probably smart to put some of your own money if you believe in the idea, but it's really, really important to stress test your idea through making sure that people are willing to put money in, and also to educate yourself up front, like, hey, what is the pathway for creating a new software business so that if I'm deviating from the pathway, I'm deviating from a point of intelligence, not ignorance.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And in your particular situation, it sounded like the co-founder may have been the first one to come to the table. And then with that specific knowledge, maybe that you didn't have of the UX, UI designer, the software engineer, like as the CTO, he's able to then help you through that design software process, right?
Yeah. Correct.
And then just to bounce back on that question about the equity in a relationship, just hypothetically, again, not your particular situation, what did you learn from your experience when this conversation does happen? Hey, I've got this idea, sign this NDA and let's chat about it. And then like, when does the equity come in? Because I'm just assuming like it's an equity position. That way you don't have to, pay a 6-figure salary to try to get your idea started.
Yeah, so the downside of bringing on a young CTO co-founder is that he has no money, right? Yeah, like he's not gonna. You can't buy a hamburger with your like early stage equity, right? So he needs to get paid, and that's part of why raising money early is part of the game, because your young employees, the equity is really important to them because that's their long-term upside, but they also need to pay rent, right? And they don't have the MD. They don't have the money in the bank that they can kind of step back and use in the meantime. And so the money actually is really, really important up front. The other lesson from this process is the most likely outcome for an early stage software company is zero, right? So significantly more than half of companies that raise a pre-seed round, so those that actually have gotten to the point where they've raised money and they are a legitimate software business, significantly more than half of those will close, right? And that's within 6 years is the latest data that I've seen. So since you're most likely outcome is zero, it's really important to give yourself every opportunity of not ending up in that basket, which means you need to treat your teammates as well as you possibly can so that they give everything that they possibly can. And that's really the only way. If everybody's hitting at the highest cylinder, that's the only way you're not going to end up at zero. So treating your co-founder well, treating your early stage employees well, and usually that means plenty of equity for those folks. That does decrease your equity in the end when you go to have a liquidity event. But say 50% of $100 million is way better than 75% of zero.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just bounce back on some of the things. VC is venture capitalist. And when you just mentioned liquidity event, and that's like an exit or selling pieces or parts or the whole entire thing as well too. So just bouncing on those words, just to make sure the listeners who may not be experienced in this have an idea of what that is. Because there's so many of the listeners, I'm sure, have that little 1 degree pivot idea in their brain. And then who may or may not be put into those situations where maybe it's an economical thing, maybe it's a market swing, or maybe it's a procedure change that ignites this opportunity for one of the listeners. Now, we talked about equity, we've talked about Zillow, we've talked about real estate agents. We've talked about being an entrepreneur, but we haven't talked about real estate. So in your busy path as a emergency physician, software company CEO, where do you find time to invest in things that aren't tied directly to your time?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Before starting Ivy Clinicians, I was able to diversify, but the part of the entrepreneurial journey is like all attention and financial resources must be focused on this one thing, otherwise it will fail. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up selling. I had bought a house. I sold the house. I now rent, and really this Ivy Clinicians is the financial focus of my current life. I think it is really important, again, for physicians who can fall into the trap of, because I know a lot about one thing, I know a lot about a lot of things. I have seen friends and colleagues fall into the trap of trying to do real estate on their own. And I think it's, like you were saying, there's something really important about the term agent, right? You want a knowledgeable person who is fighting on your behalf, who actually is an expert in the field. And my recommendation would be, if you're going to do real estate, either become the expert and that should be your focus, or be willing to say, hey, I'm really good at medicine. I am not a real estate agent, but I'm going to find a really good one who will guide me through that process. And then I can turn some of that money in the bank into real passive income.
Yep. Real estate agent who is also forced to be a realtor in order to have access to the information and the data. I love throwing that one in there right in the end. Oh, handcuff me, realtors. No, I'm just joking. Not really. So last question, Leon. If you could go back, say 10 years, maybe even 15 years, what's one thing that you would tell somebody who had maybe been on a similar path as you? So not something that's going to change your life, but what's something you could tell that person 15 years ago that may change their life, knowing the stuff that you know now and then the experience that you have now?
So I think my biggest learning is how often over the last 15 years I have failed, and how often everybody who is honest with themselves, who is 15 years into medical practice, has failed. That's true clinically, that's true financially, and that's true kind of with career risk taking. And that's not a problem. That is a life truism, right? So like the first noble truth of Buddhism is that life is full of suffering, right? That's just how life is. So once you realize like most of the things I try will not work, well, now that's not a problem. That is a learning opportunity to kind of build the next thing. You learn, try something, some of it works, some of it doesn't. Okay, what didn't work? Let's do the next thing. And so, for those, what kind of the meta message here is that if things aren't working, that's like totally normal. That's totally okay. And the question is, okay, now what do I do next? What can I build? What kind of value can I create for myself, for my loved ones, for the community around me based on what I have learned so far?
Very, very insightful. Along with everything we've spoken about in this conversation, I'm full of gratitude for your time, for your experience, and then the willingness to share that as well too. If the listeners want to get a hold of you, Leon, or learn more about Ivy Clinicians, as I hope that a lot of them will, how can they find you?
So I'm pretty easy to find. LinkedIn, or my email address is lastname.firstname@gmail.com, adelman.leon@gmail.com. The company is Ivy Clinicians. You can Google Ivy like the poison, Clinicians. And it's been an honor to be on this podcast, and really commend you for all the education that you're giving.
Awesome. It's a blessing. I love it so much, and kind of like being the outside perspective to being welcomed into the medical professional world. It's amazing because when we are at the table with different perspectives, it's so cool. Just like when you're around the people who are doing something or have that experience that you don't quite have, it's when we work together, it's always remarkable. So thank you for working with us today, Leon. You enjoy the rest of your day, man.
It's been a pleasure.
That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed how tying the characteristics of real estate into the business of medicine. Absolutely love it. It was an insightful conversation, Dr. Adelman. Some notes that I had jotted down along the way. Physicians need job transparency. Without it, they lose time and money. 2 emergency departments can have vastly different pay. Know your worth. Investing, whether in real estate or in your career, requires expertise or the right partners. It takes expertise and the right partners. If you're ready to take control of your career, check out ivyclinicians.io and connect with Dr. Adelman today. Thank you again for listening. This is a Real Estate Mogul MD.